The Intergalactic Culinary Conference, known across galaxies as a prestigious gathering of the universe's best cooks, had never expected humans to be part of the equation. The conference took place on Orbital Station Major, a floating culinary utopia dedicated solely to the exchange of recipes, ingredients, and techniques from various worlds. It was an enormous platform rotating slowly above the gas giant Faran, a place as dazzling as the colorful dishes prepared within its walls. For the past 6 days, Martu, a Morvani head chef with glistening silver scales, had watched a handful of human delegates scuttle about, nodding politely, occasionally tasting dishes from the otherworldly chefs. He'd been curious about the humans. They had only recently been invited to Majir, and their presence was unexpected. They were short, most of them around half the height of a Morvani, with rounder features and softer limbs. Martu found himself perplexed by their responses to food, especially a certain peculiar phrase that seemed to float from their lips all too frequently. Hot sauce. It had first been uttered by a human named Victor Blake, a man with a shock of dark hair and a level stare that unnerved Martu. During an esteemed tasting of Arvosi fire petals, Victor had blinked, coughed, and then mumbled to a nearby colleague would be amazing with hot sauce. Martu had caught the comment, though he dismissed it as an odd human exclamation. But the phrase kept surfacing. Every dish, no matter its origin or ingredient, was deemed potentially better with hot sauce. Martu mentioned it to his team, a group of Morvani culinary specialists and assistants who shared his curiosity. "What is this hot sauce they speak of?" asked Gal, his second in command. Gal was a scaly, aqua-skinned Morvani known for his mastery in fermentation, but he looked as puzzled as a larval apprentice. "I've heard it too," Martu replied, pacing across the sleek kitchen floor as he prepared a tray of cruelly crystal root canips. "Every meal we've served, the humans have asked for it. Is it a condiment, a seasoning, or perhaps some kind of flavor enhancer they're accustomed to?" Curiosity got the better of him, and after a few inquiries, Martu managed to secure a sample of hot sauce from Victor himself. It was contained in a small, unassuming bottle with a bright red liquid inside. Martu handled it with the same caution he would a vial of rare spices, his dark, webbed hands shaking slightly as he poured a single drop onto a spoon. He tasted it and promptly choked. The burn was immediate, a searing fire that slashed down his throat, his sinuses flaring as if they'd been flooded with volcanic ash. He staggered, coughing, while his assistants stared in horror. By the stars. He gasped, finally regaining his composure. "What is this?" Victor looked on with a grin. "That's hot sauce, Martu. It's a bit spicy, yeah." "A bit spicy," Martu muttered in disbelief. His senses were still reeling from the intensity of it, but a thrill sparked in him too. Hot sauce, for all its aggression, was fascinating. Over the next few hours, Martu experimented. He added a drop of hot sauce to a mild Morvani soup made from guathi leaves, then to a complex citrus broth that complemented blue kelp stalks. The result was unexpected. The fiery liquid transformed each dish, adding layers of heat and depth, while heightening the flavors. Even he had to admit it was compelling. But he noticed another side effect too: the burning sensation. What kind of beings would crave such intensity? The answer became increasingly clear as he observed more of the humans, who devoured food laced with this incendiary liquid, as if they relished the challenge. He was shocked, to say the least. He'd witnessed beings in agony over eating poorly seasoned meals before, but these humans seemed to enjoy the pain. And they weren't the only ones. A few of the conference's other delegates, especially the battle-hardened warriors from the Nolar system, began to follow suit. Hot sauce became the talk of the conference. Soon, even his fellow Morvani chefs were challenging themselves, adding drops of the alien liquid to dishes and laughing at each other's gasps and coughs. It became a badge of honor to withstand the heat, even as Martu eyed Victor warily, beginning to wonder if there was a deeper intention behind the human's strange condiment. Then came the day of the grand banquet, the climax of the culinary conference, where each race presented a signature dish. The humans had kept their entry shrouded in secrecy, which only piqued the curiosity of everyone present. When the time finally came, Martu found himself at a long, polished table in the center of the grand hall, surrounded by chefs and dignitaries from every corner of the galaxy. Victor stood confidently at the human presentation table, unveiling what looked like a humble plate of wings. They were arranged in a neat spiral, each wing coated in a gleaming red glaze. Victor stepped forward with a smirk. "Ladies and gentlemen and esteemed others," he began, giving a respectful nod to the multitude of beings present, "I present you with Earth's finest delicacy, spicy buffalo wings." Martu had never seen such an unassuming dish. He eyed it with skepticism, noting the bright red coating that reminded him uncomfortably of the hot sauce he'd tried earlier. He had half a mind to refuse, but the murmurs of excitement around him pushed him forward. The reputation of a head chef was built on boldness, after all. Victor passed out wings to each guest, a glint of mischief in his eyes as he watched the galaxy's finest chefs stare down at the unfamiliar morsels. Martu bit down, expecting the same level of pain he'd experienced with the hot sauce drop. But this was on another level. The burn was immediate, a hot flash that seemed to radiate out from his mouth, searing its way through his taste buds and setting his throat on fire. Martu coughed, his eyes watering as he struggled to maintain his composure. Around him, various beings from different species sputtered and gasped, clutching at their throats, yet none of them dared spit it out. It was a matter of pride. Martu glimpsed Victor, who looked entirely unfazed as he bit into his own wing with ease, a grin spreading across his face. "What is this?" choked a Dralian chef with a translucent head, his voice wavering as his skin shifted from pale green to an alarming shade of red. Victor chuckled, unfazed. "This, my friends, is the true power of hot sauce." He gestured to the table, where several more bottles of varying shapes and colors waited, their labels marked with cryptic names like Ghost Pepper Inferno and Scorpion Venom. He picked up one, flipping it in his hands with the nonchalance of a seasoned performer. "Consider these gifts from Earth. Each bottle contains a different level of heat. Use it to experiment with your dishes." Martu felt a surge of indignation. Did the humans think they could simply outdo the galaxy's best chefs with some common sauce? As his shock faded, a new determination set in. He wouldn't let humans steal the spotlight with a mere condiment. Martu rose, his silver scales glinting under the grand hall's lighting. "Your hot sauce may be intense," he said, his voice steadier now, "but we Morvani are not easily intimidated." Victor's eyes sparkled. "Glad to hear it, Martu. In fact, I'd love to see what you come up with." And so a challenge was born. That night, Martu and his team worked tirelessly, crafting a dish that would incorporate the humans' beloved sauce but go above and beyond the simplicity of mere wings. They chose a traditional Morvani recipe, a complex broth with layers of fermented sea kelp and razor-finned fish, known for its subtlety and intricate flavors. It was designed to challenge even the most refined palates. Martu added a small, controlled amount of hot sauce, just enough to bring heat without overwhelming the taste. The Morvani team tasted it cautiously, nodding as the heat enhanced the dish rather than overpowering it. They named it Spiral Inferno in honor of the way the spice wove through each layer of flavor. The next evening, as the conference's final judging approached, Martu presented Spiral Inferno with a flourish, the dish glowing softly under the lights. He caught Victor's eye as the human delegate sampled a spoonful. The reaction was immediate. Victor's eyes widened, his calm demeanor briefly faltering. He coughed, then laughed, a true, hearty laugh that echoed through the hall. "Well done, Martu," he said, grinning as his voice rasped slightly from the spice. "I can honestly say I've never tasted anything like it." As other chefs and delegates took their own cautious sips, their expressions morphed from shock to appreciation. The balance of heat and flavor was a revelation. Spiral Inferno became the talk of the banquet, a triumph of Morvani skill combined with human innovation. But the celebration was short-lived. The next morning, Martu awoke to find Victor missing, and with him, nearly every bottle of hot sauce in the station. Confusion spread as chefs realized the prized condiment was gone. Martu's first reaction was disbelief. He scanned the kitchen, looking at the empty spot where the row of hot sauce bottles had been just hours before. Rumors quickly spread through the station. with theories ranging from simple theft to bizarre culinary espionage. Some whispered that the humans had taken the hot sauce because they feared other species would master it, nullifying their edge. Others insisted it was a prank, and that Victor would reappear with the sauces at the next banquet, cackling as everyone discovered they'd been duped. Martu doubted it was either. Humans were tricksters, yes, but they weren't known for sabotaging such prestigious events. There was another reason, one he couldn't quite grasp. Chef Martu, we should go to the human quarters, Gal suggested as they paced the halls. His assistant had been visibly shaken since the bottles disappeared. If they've done something underhanded, we'll confront them directly. Martu hesitated. Confronting humans might be risky, especially without more information, but his reputation and that of the Morvani culinary tradition was at stake. He nodded at Gal, who gave a solemn nod in return. They made their way through the expansive corridors, past the chambers of other alien chefs who murmured to each other as they spotted the determined Morvani duo heading toward the human quarters. When they arrived, they found a throng of beings gathered at the entrance: Arvosi diplomats, a Nolar battle chef, even the Dralian chef who had turned an alarming shade of red after the buffalo wings. They looked equally curious, a few seeming disgruntled. Victor was standing near the entrance with his arms folded, calm and slightly amused as he answered the barrage of questions. Martu noticed he was missing the usual cocky grin, replaced instead by a guarded look that gave Martu pause. Finally, the crowd settled enough for Martu to step forward. He straightened, his silver scales catching the light as he met Victor's gaze. Victor Blake, he began, his voice steady. There's a question everyone here deserves answered. Why do the humans keep asking for hot sauce? Victor paused, letting the question hang in the air. Then he gave a wry smile. I had a feeling that would be asked eventually. With a subtle motion, he gestured for Martu and the others to follow him into the human quarters. The room was compact by Morvani standards, outfitted with strange gadgets and screens that flickered with images of Earth landscapes and humans in various activities. Victor moved aside a strange device that beeped and whirred as they passed, leading the group into a room filled with crates of supplies and strange labels. Hot sauce is more than just a condiment to humans, Victor said, picking up a small crimson bottle from one of the crates. For us, it's tradition, culture, and in some ways even a form of respect. Martu raised a scaly brow. Respect? You mean pain is part of your customs? Victor chuckled softly. In a way, humans are curious, adventurous, even reckless. Hot sauce represents our drive to push limits, to see how much we can endure. For centuries, it's been a test of courage, a way of showing resilience. Even in culinary terms, the burn reminds us we're alive. Several of the alien chefs exchanged uneasy glances. The Dralian chef huffed, his transparent head swirling with faint colors of confusion. But why all the secrecy? Martu pressed, crossing his arms. Why take the bottles? We were all beginning to learn, to incorporate this hot sauce into our own traditions. Victor's face grew serious, and he gestured to the screens, which now displayed a live image of Major Station floating serenely over the gas giant Ferran. But another, far darker image flickered on one of the other screens: images of burned fields, cities decimated by battle, soldiers on the front lines of a conflict Martu didn't recognize. There's a reason humans savor anything that pushes our limits, Victor said quietly. We come from a world that, despite its beauty, has always been harsh. Earth's environment itself pushed us to innovate, to push past what we thought we could survive. A new silence settled over the room as Victor's words sank in. Martu felt a pang of something close to understanding, though the details eluded him. But there's another reason I hid the bottles, Victor added, his voice lower. Last night, I received a message from our fleet orbiting Ferran. They intercepted a signal, one indicating that the Parner Dominion, a hostile faction who's been watching this conference, wants to use Major as leverage. They believe the chefs here control the galaxy's food supply and want to capture or destroy us all. The room was tense, the reality of the situation taking hold. The conference, intended as a peaceful exchange of culinary ideas, was now a target. The realization sent a ripple of shock through the gathered chefs, and Martu's mind whirled. Major had no defense systems, relying solely on diplomatic agreements to keep it safe. Victor continued, "The Dominion is unaware that humans have been gathering intelligence, or that we're armed with something they won't expect." Martu blinked, and that would be. Victor lifted the bottle of Ghost Pepper Inferno and grinned, his eyes hardening with determination. Hot sauce. There was a collective gasp. Some of the chefs looked incredulous, others angry, while a few seemed oddly intrigued. "You intend to fight them with condiments?" Martu scoffed, his skepticism overriding his earlier respect. Victor's expression remained calm. "Yes, because they don't know it's a weapon. We've modified the sauce, enhancing the potency to levels even we humans wouldn't dare consume. Think of it as a form of biological deterrent, except in a way that's far less lethal and entirely unexpected." The Noller battle chef's eyes gleamed with new interest. "You want to use it as a defense? Against hostile forces?" Victor nodded. "Exactly. When the Dominion sends their troops, we'll present them with a welcoming banquet. We know they pride themselves on accepting the customs of any world they conquer, so we'll serve them something they'll never forget." The tension in the room dissolved into something else, an odd blend of horror and excitement. It was a bizarre plan, and Martu couldn't decide whether it was brilliance or sheer madness. But in the grand hall of intergalactic cuisine, where bravery and innovation were held in high regard, he could hardly turn away from the challenge. Victor opened one of the crates, revealing several boxes of dark red bottles. He handed one to Martu, who took it gingerly. "This," Victor said, his voice almost reverent, "is the Reaper blend. It's made with Carolina Reaper and Morvani crystal root extract, modified for a burn unlike anything any species has known." Martu felt a shiver run down his spine as he held the bottle. He was beginning to understand the human's strange bond with hot sauce. It was more than a food. It was a weapon forged by their resilience, honed by a planet that demanded innovation just to survive. The plan came together rapidly. The chefs worked through the night, preparing a feast that looked inviting but concealed an arsenal of heat that would test even the hardiest of species. Victor supervised every stage, ensuring each dish was infused with just the right amount of the Reaper blend to incapacitate, but not harm. They called it the Flame Banquet. By dawn, reports trickled in that Dominion ships were approaching Majir. Martu's heart raced, his fingers tingling with a mix of fear and exhilaration. He stood with his team, flanked by alien chefs and Victor, each holding trays of the specially prepared dishes as they waited in the station's grand entry hall. The Dominion soldiers, clad in dark armor with silver insignias, marched in with an air of arrogance, their helmets gleaming. At their head was Commander Sirax, a towering figure with scaled armor and a rigid, impassive face. Victor stepped forward, bowing slightly. "Honored guests from the Parner Dominion," he greeted, his tone formal. "We welcome you to Major Station. It is our custom to present a banquet to newcomers. Please enjoy our hospitality." Sirax eyed him suspiciously, his gaze flicking over the assembled chefs and their trays. He seemed to sense something unusual, but the lure of such an elite culinary gathering was too tempting to resist. He nodded curtly, signaling his men to proceed. The Dominion soldiers took their seats at the banquet table, eyeing the dishes with wariness that quickly turned to eagerness as the aromas reached them. The first course, a seemingly harmless soup of blue kelp and starfruit, laced with a precise dose of Reaper blend, was served. Martu watched in tense anticipation as the soldiers lifted their spoons and drank. The effect was immediate. Eyes widened, faces flushed, and a ripple of coughs broke out among the troops. Commander Sirax frowned, taking his own sip. His expression twisted into shock, his composure faltering as he struggled to speak. What is this?" he managed to choke out. Victor leaned in, smiling coolly. "An Earth delicacy. Something to help you remember our welcome." Sirax glared at him, rage flickering in his eyes, but the effects of the Reaper blend were already taking hold. The soldiers shifted uncomfortably, clearly unprepared for the intensity of the heat. Each new dish only escalated the burn, layer upon layer building until the Dominion soldiers were visibly sweating, fidgeting, and gasping. By the time the main course arrived, a deceptively simple dish of braised meats marinated in ghost pepper inferno, many of the soldiers were barely able to stay upright. Some slumped back in their chairs, and others discreetly tried to wipe their watering eyes, clearly struggling to maintain their dignity. Sirax, still sputtering and enraged, staggered to his feet. He glared at Victor with a mix of hatred and something else, perhaps a flicker of admiration. "You humans are insufferable," he growled, his voice thick with barely contained fury. Victor only smiled wider. "We know." By the end of the flame banquet, the Dominion soldiers were forced to retreat, unable to bear any more of the heat. They stumbled out of Magir, still coughing and rubbing their eyes, their arrogance shattered by the force of the unexpected culinary assault. As the doors closed behind the last of them, the assembled chefs erupted in laughter and cheers. Martu shook Victor's hand, feeling a newfound respect for the human. "I don't think I'll ever look at hot sauce the same way again," Martu admitted, a grin spreading across his face. Victor chuckled. "It's not just sauce, my friend. For us, it's tradition, survival, a reminder that we can handle whatever the universe throws at us." Martu nodded, a sense of awe settling over him. The humans had come to Major Station with little more than a bottle of hot sauce, but they'd turned it into a weapon of diplomacy and resilience that had saved the station. And though he still didn't understand everything about humans, Martu found himself smiling at the strange irony. After all, who would have thought that the galaxy's greatest culinary defense would be found in a humble bottle of hot sauce? In the days that followed, the tale of the flame banquet spread across Major Station, and soon after, across the galaxy. Word of the humans' unusual defense weapon reached distant systems, turning hot sauce into an intergalactic phenomenon. Chefs and dignitaries from countless worlds were curious to learn about Earth's infamous condiment, and those who had tasted the blend at the banquet were quick to share exaggerated tales of its searing power. Victor, now regarded with admiration and a bit of healthy fear, became something of a legend. He was sought after for interviews, invitations, and even a few personal challenges from alien warriors and thrill seekers who wanted to see if they could survive the notorious Reaper blend. The Morvani especially were fascinated, and Martu found himself at the center of a newfound culinary renaissance. As for Martu, he and his team spent hours experimenting with the remaining bottles, trying different combinations and doses, learning how to harness the burn, as the humans called it, and weaving it into the subtle, complex layers of Morvani cuisine. He found that the controlled application of heat added a bold, invigorating depth to their recipes, something his people had never before considered possible. The Morvani even started using hot sauce sparingly as a way to increase focus and test mental endurance, a practice Martu called the spiced mind. A few nights later, as the culinary conference wound to a close, Martu invited Victor to a small celebration in the Morvani section of the station. They gathered in a low-lit, cavernous chamber filled with the aromas of seared fish, rich kelp broth, and a hint of familiar spice. To new traditions, Martu toasted, lifting a glass of Morvani sea ferment, which shimmered in the low light. Victor clinked his glass against Martu's, his grin wry. And to unlikely friends. They ate in comfortable silence, savoring the familiar heat woven into the Morvani dishes. Victor, for all his bravado, winced at one particularly spicy bite, sending Martu into a fit of laughter that resonated through the room. As the evening wore on, Martu leaned back, his gaze shifting toward the viewport, where Majir Station spun gently against a field of stars. "Victor, there's one thing I still don't understand." "What's that?" Martu turned to him, eyes glinting. "Of all the foods you could have brought, why hot sauce?" Victor looked at him thoughtfully, his expression softening. "Because it's more than just flavor. To us, it's a reminder that even the smallest things can carry strength. On Earth, when we face hardship, we don't back down. Sometimes we add fuel to it, face it head on. Hot sauce is our way of saying, bring it on." Martu nodded slowly, understanding settling over him. He could see it now, the human's resilient spirit, woven into every drop of that fiery liquid. Perhaps it was a message not only to their allies, but to any adversaries who dared to underestimate them. They finished their meal, and Victor rose, giving a respectful nod. This has been one hell of a conference, Martu. I think I've learned more about flavor from you than from any Earth chef I know. Martu laughed, a warm, rumbling sound. The feeling is mutual, Victor, and if ever you're back on Major, you'll have a place at my table. As Victor departed, Martu sat back, watching the stars beyond the viewport. He could almost imagine the next conference, a gathering filled with dishes that told stories, that held traditions as strong as the beings who created them. And somewhere in those stories, he was certain, would be a legacy of Earth's unlikely gift to the galaxy. Hot sauce had started as a mystery, a puzzling human obsession. But by the end of the flame banquet, it had become something more, a symbol of resilience, courage, and the strange, indomitable spirit of the human race.